This videotape is being made for the project, a video history of Columbia County, under the auspices of the Dayton Historical Depot Society. Today, January 23, 1991, Leola Leighty, Mrs. Monty Leighty, is being interviewed at the home of her daughter, Barbara Hanger, by Priscilla Harding. Camcorder is being used by Mike Floyd.
Good afternoon in Dayton, Washington on this 23rd day of January 1991. I'm Priscilla Harding and Mike Floyd is operating the camera. We are on a mission to record a personal recollection for the Dayton Historical Depot Society, whose aim is to preserve the history of the community and make it available to the public. Today we are at the home of Barbara Hanger, 1540 South 4th Street, to talk to her mother, Leola Leighty, about her experiences while she and her late husband, Monty, and Barbara were operating the county poor farm. According to information that Barbara provided for us, Doctors Charles Day and Marcel Patrisky, along with local leading citizens, were responsible for setting up the farm, which was supported by the county and was located across the Touche River about a mile or so west of town. Do you remember when the poor farm was started?
No, I don't. I know it was a lot longer than Mrs. Fletcher had in her book, you know. She said it was started about 1930. Well, we went there in 31, and I know the Johnsons was there, Mabel Johnson's folks, a lot longer. They must have been there as long as we were, or longer. And then Irene Crosser, Irene, bless her now, her folks were there when we took over. And those the only two that I know that are there.
Well, then it must have been started in the early 20s, would you?
I thought maybe back in the teens.
When was Dr. Patrisky active in the community? Do you remember when Dr. Patrisky was active in the community?
Oh, I never knew him.
How did you get that job?
Well, friends of ours were the commissioners, Ern Holman and Frank Poole and Dick Prater and Swansons that were there before we were. They were getting old and they just couldn't do it without help. And if you have help and you have to pay it yourself, they would only get $100 a month. So it didn't pay them to stay. And so they asked Monty and I if we'd go down, and we said yes. And we were out of work right at that time, too. And so it was looked pretty good to us.
That was during the height of the Depression, wasn't it?
Well, we went there in May of 31.
And you stayed about?
Till 42.
About 11 years.
That's when they closed it.
Why was it closed?
Well, they didn't think it was nice to have a poor farm anymore. So then they started these nursing homes all around, and they put all the people that were there in different nursing homes that would take them. Some went to Spokane, some went Spokane, I forget, Roy went to, I believe Roy went to Walla Walla. But anyway, when we left, we had all men, but as times only had children too, and the mother sometime.
About how many people were down there for you to care for?
Well, it varied, because some of them would die, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know any that ever left. They just stayed there till their time was up, you know. And when there was a woman that gonna have a baby, she'd stay there maybe a week before the baby was born, so she'd be close to the hospital. And that was that little old house over on Washington Avenue, I think. And
The hospital you're talking about? Are you talking about the hospital?
well, they never let a baby be born in the poor farm.
Oh, I see.
They always thought that was a stigma against them, and so they always took the mother up just to have her baby and then bring her back down, and she'd recuperate down there.
How did people go to the poor farm? Did they apply somewhere to go, or how were they sent there?
I really know. I suppose they went to the commissioners because they were managing it, or you know, we had to answer to them. And I suppose maybe the doctor, they knew mothers that needed to be getting ready for the babies to be born.
And he was the county health officer,
Yes.
I suppose. So I suppose that was one
Might have
way
been,
of sending people there.
but I don't actually know.
Well, I visited with Barbara a few days ago about this experience, and she told me some of the interesting things that went on down there. She talked about a man who had a goat who lived down there, or some goats maybe. Can you
No.
tell us a little about that?
Well, when Mr. Greening came, he never drank cow's milk. He always had to have goat's milk. Whether it was his idea or the doctor's, I don't know. And so when he came, we got his goats too. And of course, they had to have, I don't know what, I guess you call a male goat, so they'd have fresh goats all the time like they do a cow, you know. And they'd nearly always have twins. And so Barbara and Wally always had a little goat to play with. And there was kind of good watchdogs too, because they always let us know when there was rattlesnakes around. There was many down there.
Oh, you were up close to the hill, weren't you?
Yes.
Did anybody ever get bit by a rattlesnake?
No. The dog did, but we never did. I got an article in the paper when Barbara had to shoot her little dog. A rattlesnake bit it, and I just didn't have the nerve to shoot it. Monty was working in town then, and so I called him 2 or 3 times and said the dog was just crying so and it was hurting so bad. He just couldn't come. He said, you just have to shoot it. So I just couldn't do it. I tried, but I couldn't do it. And Barbara's only about 10 or 11 then. And so she said, Mother, you go in the house and turn the radio on and you won't hear me and I'll shoot him. And so she had to shoot her own little dog.
Oh, that's sad. About how big was this farm?
There was 70 acres in that hillside and on the flat both. But I don't know how much was down there. There was a hay field. And we always grew a big garden. And we had raspberries and strawberries and apple trees and pear trees. But we pretty nearly paid for all the food we got, because we didn't buy much, see, just flour and sugar and coffee and salt and things like that, because We had all the garden. I just put up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of quarts of fruit
All by
and
yourself?
vegetables.
Did you have help?
No, just Monty and I.
Did any of the people who lived there help?
Well, we had one, Mr. Foster, that he took over the wood boxes, and God pity anyone they brought a stick of wood in the house, because that was his job and no one else did it. And I guess that's about the only one. We had a man that was quite industry. After a meal, he'd tell the men, "Get on now, get outside and get a hoe and help me hoe these weeds." And he'd just go all over the place and cut thistles, that grow pretty high. He never get any volunteers.
Well, then were the developmentally disabled people sent down there too?
What?
The, excuse me, what?
Slow people.
Mentally. All right, mentally slow people, were they sent down there too?
We just had everyone. We had
I
Maudie
see.
Fano family down there, she lived in the mountains and didn't have a husband and produced a baby every year. And they were all mentally retarded. And Roy Savage, he was mentally retarded. And Charlie Smith was mentally retarded too. All good, they weren't harmful. Good people. But they just couldn't take care of themselves.
I see. Did you?
One time, they brought us a man from over on the hill that they couldn't speak English. And he was a sheep herder, and someone found him in the hills someplace, and he'd had a stroke. And he'd never had a bath, I don't think, since the day he was born. And his beard, I don't know, just almost impossible to get him clean. I just about got him cleaned when he died.
Oh my.
I'd wash a little bit, because he wasn't able to stand too much, and they'd say I'd wash a little more. And Roy Elwell, I don't know whether you remember him not, but he came down there and stayed quite a little while. And I don't know how, but they took him away and took him up to Medical Lake. But I didn't think there was anything wrong with his mind. He was just mad at the world because he couldn't get out, and he just had to sit in a chair or in the bed.
Well, about how many people did you have if the place was filled to capacity?
Well, I put them every place. I've had as high as 13, but that was with children.
Okay.
But I put them every place. I even had a little baby in a wagon beside her bed because we didn't have any bed for her. And the little children and the women we kept in our part and left the men in the other part because we just didn't have any way of separating them. We had one lady come down there with a little baby, and she wasn't very well, she was just a little thing. But the father of the baby was her brother. And they had that little child for a long time, little Julie. And then finally, we took her to up to Spokane, up to Lakeland Village, I guess you call it, up to Medical Lake, and then I heard, no, we took her to the orphan's home. That's where we took her, and she was adopted out, but people had 2 little boys and then couldn't have any more children, and they wanted a little girl, and they took her. She wasn't quite 2 years old when we took her up there, but I had her before she was a year old, because her mother died down there.
Would you like to go again?
Yes.
Okay, you were talking about the little girl who was adopted. I didn't know whether you'd finished that story or not when we stopped.
Well, we took her up to, yes we did, we took her up to the children's home in Spokane, and then she was adopted out, not adopted, but she was taken out into a home until she was a certain age. Then they see what her mind was, how her mind was, before they let the people adopt her. And I never did hear how it turned out. And then we had Maudie Fano's children there, and till the commissioners got tired of taking care of her and the babies, and so we kept the 4 children. When she had the 5th one, they took her up to Medical Lake, and then we kept the children for quite a long time, for nearly a year, till they finally took them all up to the children's home in Spokane too. And some of those children, 2 of them, were just quite smart. Little Henry, about 8 years old, he was just smart as a little whip. And then Amelia, she's a little older than he was, and she just wasn't all there. And then they had a little girl, younger than Henry, named Lulu, and we couldn't get her to talk at all. We tried and tried. She's about 3 years old. And then another little baby, they didn't have a name. They all belonged to Maudie Fano. Didn't have a name, and only thing we could get out of her was a hymn. Everything was a hymn, so we called her a hymn. And they were all taken up to the home too. And we had a girl, what was her name, Barbara?
Oh, I don't know.
Well,
Teenager.
anyway, she was married, and then her husband had left her. Then she had another child. They brought her down to the county farm because she had no place to go. But her sister was the druggist in towns, the drugstores, druggist. And I can't think of his name now. But they wouldn't take care of her either. And so we kept her until she married again. And she had another little baby out of wedlock while she was there. So we had her and the 2 babies until she married again. And after the 2nd baby was born, the boy married her, the man, and so she left. And then we had a family come over from the Tucannon named Cyrus, and they had 4 little children, and she was going to have another one. And so those little children never had their hair combed, didn't have any shoes, and didn't have any toenails hardly. The horses or the cow or their mother or father stepped on them, and we'd say, how'd that happen? Well, Mama stepped on me, or Papa stepped on me, and we had them for quite a little while till she recuperated, and then they found him a place down at Huntsville, and the county moved him down there. But they talked the father and the notion of having a vasectomy, and after he had it done, he come up to Dr. Day's office. They didn't make him. They talked him into it. He come up, he said, "I'd rather you taken my teeth away from me." So, funny things happen.
Did he have any more children?
Never had any more children. But little things, they didn't have clothes enough for him. And I scouted in the neighborhood and got clothes so I could have a change for him and bathe him. And then when we got straightened out, the commissioner let me get him some clothes. But see, they never had a lot of clothes. They just had a change, like a shirt and overalls and underwear and socks, and then a change for the next week. But we always kept them clean.
Were you taking care of all these little children as well as all the rest of the work?
Yes. If you had any help, you paid for them, and we didn't. $100 didn't go very far.
Now, your salary was $100 a month? Is that what you told me?
What?
Were you paid $100 a month to run that place?
Yes.
And no help?
And that was good wages in those days.
Oh my. Did you keep a milk cow?
We always had lots of milk. We had about 3 cows, so we'd always have a fresh one, because everyone drank milk, and the little children took lots of milk. And we always got a couple, 3, 4 pigs, little wieners, and fed them the scraps from the house, and butchered them out. And we always had about 300 chickens, so we had lots of eggs. And we had rabbits, so we had our own meat.
Did the county own this farm, or did they?
No,
did
they
somebody,
owned it.
They owned it.
Yeah. We made butter, and that went on our grocery bill, and it always paid our grocery bill, because I was about 25 or 30 pounds of butter a week to the grocery store.
How much was a pound of butter in that day?
I think that was about 15 cents a pound.
I've got a note here that there was flooding down there once in a while.
What?
Flooding. Did you have some trouble with flooding?
Yes. Just once we had a flood, and we got up in the morning. We always got up at 5 o'clock, and the light getting lighter. We looked out towards Clegg's, and I said, "Must be snow on the ground, because it looks light over towards Mona's." And when it got lighter, we saw the river had flooded over, and all between us and Clegg was water. Barbara couldn't go to school for about a week.
Did it get into the house down there?
Well, our basement always got about 15 inches of water in it, but it's clear, it's seep in. And so in the wintertime, we had to make a little walkway in the basement. It wasn't a basement, it was a fruit room just underneath the house. And so we walked on the little walk around to the shelves for things.
Well, when you butchered, how did you store the meat?
We canned it
Oh,
and smoked it.
you smoked it yourself?
Smoked, yes.
Oh. You didn't have freezers in those days.
Didn't have what?
Freezers?
Oh, we bought a refrigerator, but the county couldn't afford to get it, so we bought one of our own.
And you did all the canning
All the canning,
and the baking.
baking, yeah. 8 big loaves a day.
Now, I got a note here about a pet deer.
Well, someone petted a little deer, and then they couldn't, it would fall 'em, so they brought it in the county, the courthouse, and the county commissioners sent it down to us. And we put it on one of the goats and raised it. And it always, when it was little, it slept with a dog behind the kitchen stove. And then when, I don't know how, she must have been a couple of years old, we got up one morning and she was gone. And we looked all over for her and couldn't find, and everyone said they thought they saw her and they thought they saw her. And about a week later, she came back, and then when the time was up, she had twin babies. We took them up to the mountains and turned them loose.
Did they stay? Did they stay in the mountains?
I guess they did.
Are there any more interesting characters you'd like to talk about who stayed with you down there?
Oh, there's lots of funny things. When we had Bill Bolts, he was an old harness maker from Starbuck, and we had an awful time trying to talk him an ocean to take a bath. And he said, he just cried and cried and the tears rolled down. He said, my mother never give me a bath. I don't know why I have to now. And I don't believe she did either.
Did you?
Monty did. Monty bathed the men, and I took care of the women.
Was Monty working in town all this time?
Oh, no, he couldn't. Only time that he worked in town was when we was breaking up, you know. I had to, there was going to be no more farm, county farm, so he had to find a job. So that's when he went to work at the Farm Bureau. And that was less than a year when he worked uptown, and then I did it alone, except the milking. I didn't do that.
But you stayed there until the poor farm closed for good.
Yes, till the all men.
Now, I've got a note here that the county commissioners at that time were Frank Poole, Ern Holman, and Dick Prater.
Yes.
They were the commissioners all during that time?
No. When we first went there, they changed.
Every 4 years there was an election?
Well, some of them stayed longer than us, one term. Ern stayed on for a long time until Nuke Fry beat him out, and then Dick Prater just quit. He retired. He didn't want to be commissioner anymore.
Were you born in Dayton?
No.
Where were you born?
Down a little ways below north of Vancouver, a place called Hayes. It's like the Hayes station over here. It isn't anymore.
And is that where you grew up?
Well, no. When I started school, I started in town, Wesley Center, and then we moved to Dayton. And I went to school here or there, and then we moved to Canada, and I finished my schooling up there. And then we came back to Dayton.
How many were in your family?
I had 4 brothers and 2 sisters.
Were any of them here? Did any of them live around here?
Dale Robbins, my brother, lived here. And Homer lived here for a while. He and Lottie came up and went to school here and finished school here.
Somebody told me that there's a birthday coming up right away. On Saturday, it's your birthday, I understand.
I don't count them anymore.
You don't want to tell us how many?
That's 88, but I don't care.
Well, there's no reason why you should. That's quite remarkable. Do you think of anything else about the poor farm or any other interesting experiences that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I don't want it in print, because some of us are not very nice.
Oh? Well, I know you were quite a bridge player.
Oh, I like to play bridge.
Well, we'll thank you for the interview.
Well,
And
I hope everything's all right.
I'm sure it will be. This will be one of the highlights, I think.
Well, we never had a picture of the farm, Clowney Farm, but it still looks just like it did when we lived down there. If you take a picture now, it look just like it did when we were there.
Oh yes, the building that is still there. Now, we didn't talk about the pest house. I forgot that.
Well, we never used it, never had occasion to. But when they had the measles and things like that, they had the people go up there. But we never had any occasion to use it at all.
So you don't really know.
I don't know a thing about the pest house.
It's just interesting that there was one.
Yes. But it's where they took ones that has diseases that you would pass on.
Do you know who owns the what used to be the county poor farm now?
Barbara talked to him. Farley.
Renee Farley.
It's in private hands then.
David and Renee Farley.
It's in private hands.
Yes.
Well, I hope we haven't worn you out, and thanks very much for allowing us to talk to you
I
about
get
this.
tired.
This is a picture of my mother and father, Monty and Leola Leighty, on their surprise 40th wedding anniversary party down at the 410 restaurant that now has burnt down. And we had all of her living brothers and sisters there from down in the Portland area and Vancouver area where she was born. The anniversary was taken in 1963. This picture is taken at the 1922 Dayton Days, and it was called the Grand Right and Left, which was a quadrille with horses. And the young people of the community were asked to join in, and so they had the quadrille almost always at a Dayton Days performance in those years. Some of those on the horses are Lucille Holman and Fred Dorr, Leola Robbins and her brother Dell, Lenore Dorothy and Joe Culberson, and Earl Holman, and we don't know who his partner was.
Oh, who was Leola Robbins?
Now what do I do?
Tell us who she was.
But that's who she was there.
Just say.
This is a wedding picture of Monty and Leola Leighty, taken in January the 24th, 1923. They were married here in Dayton, and then Bob and Minerva Egger gave them a honeymoon trip to Walla Walla. And Leola's maiden name was Robbins.
of what was formerly known as the Columbia County Farm, or the Poor Farm. It is presently lived in by Dave and Renetta Farley. Renetta is the granddaughter of Mr. and Mrs. James Ogden, who lived in it immediately after it was the Poor Farm. Now, according to Barbara Hanger and Dale Rainwater, or Faye Rainwater, excuse me, the Columbia County Farm was in existence in 1901, and we have no idea how long it was in existence before that, but that takes care of part of the controversy that has been going on about the date of the farm. The farm is located about 1 mile west of Dayton along the Touchy River.